Oh my gosh, beautiful roses. I'm throwing roses, roses, roses.
I love dealing with a rich bitch. Cause she gonna trick and we gonna trick bigger.
Family in Philadelphia is desperately seeking justice for their loved one. It's been more than 2 years since someone shot and killed a 40-year-old mother. Investigators, along with the grieving family, hope you can help solve this case. Here is Rick Williams with tonight's Crime Fighters Report.
In North Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on October 7th, 2023, a 40-year-old woman named Tiffany Natifa Wade was shot and killed inside a barbershop on the 2500 block of West Lehigh Avenue in the early afternoon. Wade, a registered nurse and mother of three, was found unresponsive with multiple gunshot wounds shortly before 2 p.m. Police identified 44-year-old Armin Hilton, her boyfriend and the father of her youngest child, as a suspect in the shooting and issued a warrant for his arrest. Hilton has been classified as armed and dangerous and remains at large. Law enforcement has offered a reward for information leading to his capture and conviction. The case remains unsolved, with investigators seeking leads from the public and evidence that may explain the motive and final moments of Wade's life. This documentary explores her life, the circumstances of her death, and the ongoing search for justice without speculation. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Tiffany Wade, commonly known by the nickname Natifa, was born in 1983 and was 40 years old at the time of her death in October 2023. She was raised in Pennsylvania and maintained long-standing ties to the Philadelphia area, where much of her adult life unfolded. Those who knew her described her as deeply rooted in her community, with family connections that extended across neighborhoods and generations. Wade was a mother of 3 children, a role that defined much of her daily life and long-term planning. Her household responsibilities were structured around childcare, school schedules, medical appointments, and financial management. Family members later confirmed that her days were typically organized and routine-driven, balancing professional obligations with parenting demands. Much of her time outside of work was spent ensuring stability for her children, including transportation, meals, and supervision. Professionally, Wade worked in healthcare as a nurse, a field that required formal education, licensing, and ongoing training. Her work placed her in environments that demanded attention to detail, adherence to protocols, and long shifts. Colleagues and relatives noted that she took her professional role seriously and viewed it as both a career and a means of support of her family. Nursing also influenced her daily habits, including structured schedules and consistent routines. Among friends and family, Wade was regarded as dependable and self-directed. She was known to manage her responsibilities without frequent reliance on others. While she maintained a social circle, much of her time was devoted to work and parenting. Her routines were described as predictable, often involving set locations she visited regularly, including businesses in her neighborhood. On October 7th, 2023, Wade's presence at a barbershop on West Lehigh Avenue in North Philadelphia was part of her normal movement through familiar areas. The visit was not initially considered unusual, and there was no indication that she expected the events that would follow. The barbershop was a public, daytime setting frequented by community members and local residents. Wade's personal relationships were largely kept private, though those closest to her were aware of key aspects of her relationship history. Over time, she had been involved in several partnerships, including a relationship with Armin Hilton, who would later be identified as the primary suspect in her death. Wade and Hilton shared a child together, making their relationship not only personal but also parental. Their shared responsibility for their youngest child required continued communication and coordination, regardless of the status of their romantic involvement. Family members indicated that parenting logistics necessitated periodic contact. The timeline of Wade and Hilton's relationship was not fully detailed publicly, but it was known that they were no longer in a stable partnership at the time of the shooting. The nature of their separation, whether recent or prolonged, was not fully clarified. However, They remain connected through shared parenting responsibilities. Accounts from relatives suggest that there have been tensions between Wade and Hilton at various points, though the extent and frequency of conflicts were not fully documented in public records. There were no widely reported restraining orders or formal court filings disclosed prior to shooting, but family members later acknowledged that the relationship had experienced difficulties. In the days and weeks leading up to October 7, 2023, Wade maintained her usual routines. There was no public indication that she had reported immediate threats or sought emergency intervention. Whether warning signs were present remains unclear. Some family members later stated that, in hindsight, certain interactions raised concerns, but at the time, those concerns did not escalate into formal action. Armand Hilton was 44 years old at the time he was identified by police as the suspect in the shooting death of Tiffany Wade. He was known to have resided in or maintained ties to the Philadelphia area and surrounding regions. His personal background, including employment history and prior residences, was not fully detailed publicly. Hilton's connection to Wade was both personal and parental. As the father of her youngest child, he had an established link to her life beyond any romantic involvement. This connection placed her within Wade's immediate personal circle and made him known to her family. Publicly available information regarding Hilton's prior interactions with law enforcement was limited. Authorities did not initially release extensive details about any criminal history, though they emphasized the seriousness of the charges issued against him following the shooting. After the incident, Hilton did not remain at the scene. Police later confirmed that he fled and could not be located during initial search efforts. As a result, he was classified as a fugitive. Law enforcement agencies described him as armed and dangerous, a designation intended to alert the public and other agencies to exercise caution. Advisories were issued urging anyone with information on Hilton's whereabouts to contact authorities. His image and identifying details were distributed through official channels. Despite these efforts, he remained at large for an extended period following the shooting. The shooting occurred inside a barbershop located along West Lehigh Avenue in North Philadelphia. The incident took place in the early afternoon, shortly before 2 p.m., a time when the business was open and accessible to the public. Emergency responders arrived to find Tiffany Wade inside the establishment, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. She was unresponsive upon discovery. The interior of the barbershop showed signs consistent with a violent incident, prompting officers to secure the scene immediately. Medical personnel assessed Wade at the scene and initiated emergency procedures. Despite these efforts, her injuries were severe. She was transported for further medical attention, where she was later pronounced dead. Law enforcement officers sealed off the barbershop and surrounding area to preserve evidence. Nearby businesses were temporarily affected, with operations paused during the investigation. Witnesses in the vicinity were questioned, and the area remained under police control for an extended period. The shooting had an immediate impact on the neighborhood. Residents and business owners were confronted with the presence of law enforcement activity and the knowledge that a fatal crime had occurred in a familiar public space. The barbershop, once a routine community location, became the focal point of an active homicide investigation. Investigators arriving at the barbershop focused first on documenting the victim's injuries and preserving the physical scene. Tiffany Natifa Wade was found with multiple gunshot wounds. The placement of the injuries indicated targeted firing rather than random discharge. Law enforcement noted wounds to critical areas of the body, suggesting the shooter aimed deliberately rather than firing indiscriminately. The medical examiner later conducted a full autopsy to determine the official cause and manner of death. The cause of death was ruled as complications from multiple gunshot wounds. The manner of death was classified as homicide. The examiner documented entry and exit wounds, internal damage, and the path of each bullet. This information helped establish the angle from which shots were fired and whether the victim was stationary or moving at the time. Ballistic evidence collected at the scene included spent shell casings recovered from the floor of the barbershop. Each casing was logged, photographed, and entered into evidence. Investigators used these casings to determine the caliber of the firearm used. The casings were also processed for potential fingerprints or trace DNA, though recovery from fire casings is often limited. Trajectory analysis was conducted using bullet paths, damage to walls, and bloodstain patterns. Investigators marked bullet impacts and reconstructed the shooter's likely position. This analysis suggested a close-range shooting, consistent with witness descriptions and injury patterns. The angle of fire indicated the shooter was standing and facing the victim during at least part of the incident. The weapon itself was not recovered at the scene. The absence of the firearm became a central issue in the investigation. Without the weapon, forensic comparisons to other crimes or test firing could not be conducted. Investigators expanded their search to include possible disposal locations and sought information from the public regarding the firearm's whereabouts. Bloodstain analysis further supported the sequence of events. Patterns on the floor and nearby surfaces indicated where the victim collapsed. Limited blood transfer suggested the victim did not move far after being shot. Scene reconstruction placed the shooting inside a confined area of the barbershop, reinforcing conclusions about proximity and intent. Time of death estimates were based on emergency call timestamps, witness observations, and medical findings. These estimates align closely with reports placing the shooting shortly before police arrival. Establishing a narrow time window helped investigators compare witness timelines and surveillance footage. Witnesses inside the barbershop played a critical role in shaping the investigative narrative. Employees and customers present at the time were interviewed separately to avoid cross-contamination of accounts. Each witness was asked to describe what they observed before, during, and after the shooting. Several witnesses described routine activity inside the barbershop before the incident. No major disturbances were reported immediately prior. Some witnesses noted a brief interaction between Wade and the suspect upon entry, though details varied. No prolonged argument was consistently reported, suggesting the encounter escalated quickly. Descriptions of the shooting itself were generally consistent in terms of timing and location. Witnesses recalled hearing multiple gunshots in rapid succession. Some reported seeing the suspect standing near Wade immediately afterward, while others focused on seeking cover or fleeing the area. Observations of the suspect's movements were crucial. Witnesses reported seeing a man matching the suspect's description entering the barbershop and leaving shortly after the gunfire. Clothing descriptions and physical characteristics were documented. Several witnesses noted the direction in which the suspect fled. Investigators assessed the reliability of each statement by comparing timelines, vantage points, and consistency across interviews. Minor discrepancies were expected and did not undermine the overall account. Statements that aligned with physical evidence and surveillance footage were given greater weight. Witness timelines were compiled to establish a minute-by-minute reconstruction. This allowed investigators to determine the sequence of entry, shooting, and exit. The combined witness accounts supported the conclusion that the shooting was brief and targeted, with no extended confrontation. Surveillance footage became a key component of the investigation. Cameras inside the barbershop provided limited coverage but captured portions of the interior space. Exterior cameras recorded the sidewalk and entrance. Investigators reviewed footage frame by frame to identify movements before and after the shooting. Exterior footage showed a person believed to be the suspect approaching the barbershop shortly before the incident. The same footage captured a rapid exit following the gunshots. Timestamps were synchronized with emergency call records to confirm accuracy. Nearby businesses were canvassed for additional camera footage. Several surrounding establishments provided video showing street activity. While some footage lacked clear facial identification, it helped trace the suspect's direction of travel after leaving the scene. Cell phone data analysis was conducted on devices associated with both the victim and the suspect. Investigators examined call logs, text messages, and location data. This analysis aimed to establish communication patterns and confirm presence in the area at the relevant time. Communication records were also reviewed to determine whether there had been recent contact between the victim and the suspect. Investigators looked for evidence of coordination, confrontation, or planned meetings. Any such data was carefully logged and preserved for potential prosecution. Despite extensive review, limitations remained. Some cameras did not record continuously or had obstructed views. Certain digital records required warrants and cooperation from service providers, introducing delays. These gaps required investigators to rely more heavily on witness accounts and physical evidence. The first 24 hours after the shooting were critical. Police secured the scene, notified homicide detectives, and began witness interviews. The victim was formally identified, and next of kin were notified. Early evidence collection focused on preserving perishable forensic data. Within hours, investigators identified a suspect based on witness descriptions and known personal connections. Law enforcement quickly established that the suspect had a prior relationship with the victim. This information narrowed the scope of the investigation. An arrest warrant was issued shortly after the suspect was identified. The warrant included homicide charges and authorized law enforcement to take the suspect into custody. Alerts were distributed to patrol units and neighboring jurisdictions. Regional and state agencies were notified to assist with the search. Information was shared across law enforcement databases. Public bulletins were released requesting tips and emphasizing that the suspect should not be approached. Early search efforts included checks of known addresses, workplaces, and locations connected to the suspect. Investigators followed leads from tips, though none resulted in an immediate arrest. Time delays reduced the likelihood of locating the suspect in familiar locations. Investigative challenges emerged as the suspect remained at large. Without a weapon recovery or direct arrest, progress depended on public cooperation and digital evidence. Missed opportunities included delayed tips and incomplete footage. As time passed, the case transitioned from an active manhunt to a sustained fugitive investigation. Law enforcement continues to issue updates, review new information, and pursue leads as they arise. The case remains open, with the timeline serving as a framework for ongoing efforts. Following the identification of Armin Hilton as the primary suspect, law enforcement initiated an active manhunt. Investigators first focused on Hilton's known residences, recent addresses, and locations he was known to frequent. Officers conducted checks at family homes, former workplaces, and locations associated with friends and acquaintances. These early efforts were aimed at determining whether Hilton remained in the Philadelphia area or had left the city shortly after the shooting. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage from nearby businesses and traffic cameras to track possible escape routes. Transit hubs, including bus stations and train terminals, were examined for activity linked to Hilton in the hours following the incident. Financial records and phone activity were analyzed to identify potential movements or communication patterns. Investigators also examined whether Hilton had access to vehicles registered to him or others. Public tips became a significant part of the investigation. Law enforcement encouraged community members to report sightings or information related to Hilton's whereabouts. Tips were received through phone lines, online portals, and anonymous reporting systems. Each tip was logged, assessed, and cross-checked against known evidence. While some leads prompted follow-up searches, none resulted in an arrest. Coordination with other jurisdictions expanded the scope of the search. Law enforcement agencies across Pennsylvania were notified of the warrant. Information was also shared with neighboring states, allowing officers outside Philadelphia to remain alert for Hilton. This interagency cooperation included data sharing, fugitive task force involvement, and periodic updates on the status of the case. A reward was offered for information leading to Hilton's arrest and conviction. The reward was intended to encourage individuals with relevant information to come forward, particularly those who may have been hesitant to contact authorities. Despite the incentive, no tip has yet resulted in locating the suspect. Several obstacles complicated the manhunt. Investigators noted that suspects who leave familiar environments can be difficult to track, especially if they avoid digital communication or rely on temporary shelter. The absence of confirmed sightings limited the ability to narrow search areas. As time passed without an arrest, the likelihood of Hilton remaining hidden increased, requiring continued allocation of investigative resources. Months after the shooting, the suspect remains at large. The passage of time has shifted the manhunt from an immediate pursuit to a sustained investigation, requiring periodic reassessment of strategies and continued public engagement. The immediate effects of Tiffany Wade's death were most pronounced in the lives of her 3 children. With their primary caregiver gone, family members were required to make rapid decisions regarding housing, daily care, and stability. Temporary arrangements were put in place, while longer-term guardianship plans were considered. Custody and guardianship responsibilities shifted to relatives, requiring coordination with legal authorities to formalize arrangements. These processes involved documentation, court filings, and assessments to ensure the children's needs were met. Family members assumed roles that included transportation, schooling oversight, and healthcare management. Relatives appeared at public events related to the case, including vigils and law enforcement briefings, while maintaining limited public commentary. Their presence signaled continued interest in the investigation without engaging directly with media outlets. Requests for privacy were made to allow the family to manage personal matters without constant public attention. Over time, the long-term implications for the children became clearer. Educational continuity, emotional support services, and financial stability required sustained planning. The loss of Wade's income affected household resources, prompting relatives to assume additional financial responsibilities. Legal matters also shifted to family members. These included handling estate issues, managing benefits, and addressing ongoing expenses related to child care. The absence of resolution in the criminal case added uncertainty, as the legal process remained incomplete without an arrest. The shooting prompted a strong public reaction within the surrounding community. Residents expressed concern about the occurrence of a fatal shooting during daytime hours in a commercial area. Questions were raised about safety in public spaces and the effectiveness of existing crime prevention measures. Vigils and memorial gatherings were organized in the days following the incident. These events took place near the location of the shooting and in nearby community spaces. Attendees focused on acknowledging the loss and calling for accountability. Community discussions increasingly addressed issues related to domestic and relationship-based violence. Local organizations used the case as a reference point to highlight warning signs and advocate for intervention resources. Public forums and meetings included conversations about support systems for individuals experiencing conflict in personal relationships. Support efforts extended to practical assistance for Wade's family. Residents organized fundraisers, shared resources, and coordinated aid through community networks. These efforts demonstrated collective involvement while avoiding interference with the investigation. As time passed without an arrest, community concerns shifted toward the unresolved nature of the case. Continued awareness efforts emphasized the importance of information sharing and cooperation with law enforcement. Initial media coverage focused on the shooting itself, reporting the basic facts, identifying the victim, and naming the suspect. Breaking news segments detailed the location, time, and law enforcement response. Images of the suspect were released to assist in identification. Follow-up coverage increased as it became clear that Hilton remained at large. News outlets reported on the manhunt, the reward offer, and appeals from police for public assistance. Periodic updates were issued as investigators confirmed the case remained active. Public sharing of suspect images played a central role in awareness efforts. Flyers, social media posts, and televised segments circulated Hilton's photograph and identifying details. This dissemination aimed to reach individuals who might recognize him or have information about his location. Social media discussions developed alongside traditional reporting. Users shared news articles, speculated about possible whereabouts, and debated investigative progress. While some online discussions generated awareness, others introduced unverified claims, requiring law enforcement to caution against misinformation. Sustaining public attention over time proved challenging. As new cases emerged, coverage became less frequent. Media outlets balanced reporting on ongoing investigations with emerging news, resulting in periodic rather than continuous updates. Despite these challenges, media coverage remained a key factor in keeping the case visible. Unsolved homicide cases often rely on renewed attention to generate new leads, making continued reporting an essential component of public awareness. Charges were filed against Armand Hilton shortly after the shooting, formally naming him as the suspect in Tiffany Wade's death. These charges remain active under an outstanding arrest warrant. An active warrant authorizes law enforcement to arrest the suspect upon location. When a suspect is not in custody, legal proceedings are limited. Courts cannot advance to preliminary hearings or trial phases without the defendant present. As a result, the case remains in holding status, awaiting arrest. Delays in apprehension can affect prosecution in several ways. Witness memories may fade, and the passage of time can complicate evidence presentation. To address this, investigators prioritize evidence preservation, including secure storage of physical items, digital records, and recorded statements. Prosecutors maintain the case file and prepare for future proceedings. If the suspect is apprehended, the case will resume from the initial stages, including arraignment and pretrial hearings. Potential future legal proceedings depend entirely on Hilton's capture. Until then, the case remains open, with law enforcement and prosecutors continuing efforts to resolve the investigation and move the process forward. Cases involving intimate partner-related homicides often follow identifiable patterns that emerge across jurisdictions and demographics. These cases frequently involve a personal relationship between the victim and the suspect, shared history, and ongoing contact even after the relationship has deteriorated. Unlike random acts of violence, intimate partner homicides tend to occur in familiar settings and during routine moments, which complicates prevention and early intervention. The familiarity between the parties often allows proximity and access that would not otherwise exist. In this case, the victim and the suspect shared a personal relationship and a child. This connection placed them in continued contact, increasing exposure even if the relationship had ended or become strained. Such dynamics are commonly observed in cases where separation does not result in a clean break. Shared parenting responsibilities, unresolved disputes, and informal communication can maintain access points that escalate risk. Several risk factors commonly associated with intimate partner violence were present. These include a prior romantic relationship, emotional or relational instability, and continued proximity after the relationship's breakdown. While not all relationship conflicts lead to violence, research consistently shows that the period following separation is one of the most dangerous. Control disputes, perceived loss, and unresolved grievances can intensify during this phase, particularly when there is no formal intervention. Preventing violence after a relationship ends presents significant challenges. Legal protections such as restraining orders require reporting and enforcement, which may not always occur. In many cases, victims may not anticipate lethal outcomes, or may choose not to involve law enforcement due to personal, financial, or family considerations. Additionally, warning signs may be visible only in hindsight, making proactive intervention difficult. Law enforcement response is often limited by available information prior to a crime. Unless a formal complaint is made or a court order is in place, police authority to intervene is restricted. In cases where no active warrants or documented threats exist, agencies are constrained to reactive measures. This limitation becomes especially evident when violence occurs suddenly, without prior police involvement. Public safety concerns intensify when a suspect evades capture. An individual wanted for a violent crime poses ongoing risk, not only to those directly connected to the case, but also to the broader community. The absence of an arrest can undermine public confidence and prolong uncertainty. Each day a suspect remains at large increases the complexity of the investigation and the difficulty of securing timely justice. The ability of a suspect to avoid capture often reflects a combination of factors: access to transportation, familiarity with the area, assistance from others, or movement across jurisdictions. Even with coordinated efforts, law enforcement relies heavily on timely tips and accurate information. Without these, searches can become prolonged and resource-intensive. Despite investigative progress, several critical questions remain unresolved. Chief among them is motive. Law enforcement has not publicly disclosed a definitive motive for shooting. While relationship history provides context, it does not explain the specific trigger or sequence of decisions that led to the act. Without a disclosed motive, the public is left to interpret limited facts without clarity. Another unresolved issue concerns the final interactions between the victim and the suspect. Investigators have not released detailed information about any conversations, meetings, or communications immediately preceding the shooting. Understanding whether there was a planned meeting, a chance encounter, or a dispute at the location could significantly alter interpretations of intent and premeditation. The existence of additional witnesses also remains unclear. While individuals were present in the vicinity, it is not publicly known whether all potential witnesses have been identified or interviewed. Some witnesses may have left before police arrived, or may not have realized the significance of what they observed. The possibility that unreported observations exist continues to be a factor in the investigation. Questions also persist regarding how the suspect managed to avoid capture. The time between the shooting and the issuance of public alerts may have allowed for movement beyond immediate search areas. Investigators have not disclosed whether the suspect had access to resources, assistance, or safe locations that facilitated evasion. The lack of transparency in this area is common during active investigations, but leaves gaps in public understanding. Another area of uncertainty involves undisclosed evidence. Law enforcement typically withholds certain details to protect the integrity of the case. This may include surveillance footage, digital records, or forensic findings that have not been released. While such discretion is standard, it also means the public does not have a complete picture of the evidentiary strength of the case. These unanswered questions contribute to the case's unresolved status. Each gap represents not only missing information, but also a potential pathway toward resolution if addressed. As of the most recent updates, the case remains open and active. The suspect has not been apprehended, and the arrest warrant is still in effect. Law enforcement agencies continue to list the individual as wanted in connection with a homicide, emphasizing that the investigation has not been closed or deprioritized. Search efforts continue through a combination of investigative work and public engagement. Detectives review incoming tips, monitor potential sightings, and coordinate with other jurisdictions. The passage of time does not invalidate the warrant, and efforts to locate the suspect remain ongoing. Public information plays a critical role in advancing the case. Media coverage, community awareness, and tip submissions are often essential in locating suspects who have evaded initial searches. Law enforcement relies on the public to report credible information, particularly when suspects move across city or state boundaries. If the suspect is apprehended, the legal process will resume with formal arraignment and court proceedings. Prosecutors would be required to present evidence supporting the charges, while the defense would have the opportunity to challenge the case. The outcome would depend on the strength of the evidence, witness testimony, and legal arguments presented at trial. Potential outcomes include conviction, acquittal, or plea agreements, each carrying different legal and social consequences. Sentencing, if applicable, would follow statutory guidelines and judicial discretion. Long-term consequences extend beyond the courtroom. The victim's family continues to live with the loss and uncertainty associated with an unresolved case. The community remains affected by the absence of closure. For law enforcement, the case represents an ongoing responsibility to pursue accountability. Until the suspect is located and the case proceeds through the justice system, it remains unfinished. The continued search underscores a lasting impact of unresolved violent crime and the importance of sustained investigative effort. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.